The Labor Department has released the latest jobs numbers, showing a slight decline in the number of people filing for unemployment over the last week. For the week ending November 28th, an additional 712,000 Americans filed for first-time unemployment benefits. That is down roughly 75,000 claims from the previous week. These latest numbers are a welcome decline after 2 consecutive weeks of increased jobless claims. As coronavirus cases surge following the Thanksgiving holiday, there are questions about the implications the spike could have on the economy moving forward. Lori Bettinger joins me now from Washington, D.C. She is the president of BancAlliance and the former director of the Troubled Asset Relief Program during the Obama administration. Welcome, Lori. Great to have you with us. So we saw 712,000 people apply for first-time unemployment, which is down 75,000 claims from last week. So this shows Americans are still losing their jobs at an unusually high level. What do these latest numbers reflect for the current state of the U.S. economy?
Well, I agree with you completely that it's good to see, a decline of any size is really important. But I have to say, it still feels like these are really elevated levels. I mean, we're not seeing the numbers that we saw in March, clearly, but, over 700,000 people a week is still a pretty big problem for the economy overall. And as you mentioned, we're continuing to see more rolling shutdowns, either at a state level or within a state, by county or by city. And it's hard not to think that we're going to continue to see a lot of volatility in those initial unemployment claims, but I don't see them going down materially in the immediate future. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see sort of a return to an uptick in the next few weeks, in particular in the hospitality sectors, as we just see those that may have opened a few months ago start to close down now.
Right. It's hard to see anything but a grim outlook in those industries as we're seeing coronavirus cases surge on a national level. And Americans are still awaiting the release of the vaccine, which is a bright spot. Still, right now, states are beginning to reissue those coronavirus restrictions, as you mentioned, and Americans are being urged to stay inside unless going out for essentials. So, we just mentioned how that would have an impact on the hospitality industry, but could we see the same sorts of, spending patterns we saw during the first lockdown in the spring, where people stayed home and they, did little home renovations, home spending went up? Can we expect a similar pattern to play out?
That's a good question. And it's hard to know because you have some different effects this time, right? We have the holidays coming up. So I think, we usually see an increase in that. All of the initial results coming out from Black Friday and Cyber Monday really are showing this huge shift to online spending, away from in-person retail. So you might see some of that. Again, that unfortunately might benefit more of the larger companies and continue to put pressure on local small businesses that are so important in our community. But I suspect at this time, since there is a vaccine in, maybe the near future, not the immediate future for, many of us that might not be essential workers or in high risk categories, that, that might give some people hope to spend a little bit more with the hopes that the economy will normalize sooner than later. That said, I think there are absolutely participants in certain parts of this economy for whom the outlook looks bleak. It's been bleak since March. Maybe they haven't managed to be rehired. They've seen the stimulus come to an end. And it's hard to see what is really a large group of the population decide to resume spending now with no short-term certainty.
And so does that uncertainty around the coronavirus vaccine in terms of when will I get it, right? Like you said, most of us are not frontline workers. Most of us will not be first in line for the vaccine. So when will the average American feel safe? When will the average American feel that they are, able to go out in the world without risk of getting the coronavirus? Does this uncertainty around that timeline help or hurt the job market?
I think the uncertainty absolutely hurts the job market, in my opinion. And when you look back, and I think we've heard this so many times, we are dealing with a public health crisis that has huge economic implications. It affects all of us. But to fix this, you really have to fix the public health crisis first to improve the economy. But what that means, in a day-to-day world is when we look at who's going to be the first to get the vaccine, it's residents of nursing homes. It's the people who are working in nursing homes. And that makes complete sense from a public health perspective, since those organizations have been so adversely impacted. But, beginning your vaccine campaign there is not going to lead to an immediate economic impact. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. That's absolutely the right thing on the public health side. But you can't say that the minute we start vaccines, the economy is going to open. And how long that takes, I think, is a big open question. I mean, here in the US, I don't even think we have approval yet to begin those vaccination campaigns.
And what is the risk then to the economy as a whole, to a lopsided recovery, which is something that we are likely to see, and we're sort of still seeing? I mean, certain, jobs in the upper echelons, the jobs that transitioned easily to working at home, to working online, those jobs are pretty secure for the most part. It's the jobs on the sort of the bottom echelon of the economy, like you said, the hospitality industry, the small store owners, the music teachers, the dance instructors, the gym trainers, people like that who don't see, the light at the end of the tunnel right now. How is that that lopsided, recovery going to eventually play out in the economy as a whole?
I think it's going to have big negative impacts, and potentially over the long term if there isn't more support for a lot of the groups that you just mentioned. I mean, for example, we've seen that a lot of smaller businesses in traditional communities of color don't necessarily have sort of the deep relationships with lending institutions that other small businesses might have. And so to your point about the light at the end of the tunnel, I don't know that many small businesses actually see the light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes you'll hear someone say, well, this is a good time to rely on your friends and family, to help your business get through there. That's a luxury that a lot of people and small business owners certainly don't have now, and in reality probably never had. So I think without stimulus that really lifts everyone along, not just the white collar workers, like myself that have been able to work at home since March, I think you're going to have a very lopsided recovery, which has really long-term negative impacts for our economy.
Absolutely. And speaking of stimulus, millions of Americans will exhaust their unemployment benefits by the end of this month. We do know now that Speaker Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Schumer both have voiced support for a $908 billion bipartisan coronavirus relief plan that was presented by senators. If approved by the White House, what relief would this provide struggling Americans across the country, and who does it leave out?
Well, I think the great news is that, you would see that sort of additional unemployment payment of $300 a week continue. I think it's for 18 months, which is great. So there is something in there that will have a direct positive impact on unemployed Americans, which is so important. There's also, I think, great stimulus earmarked for small businesses. There, I think, you always have to look at the details. How is that going to be distributed to small businesses? And is it going to get to those small businesses that need the money the most? I mean, that's a key question. But, I think there's other areas where there's at least some money in there for local and state governments. But my question would be, is it enough? I mean, they are carrying so much of the load right now. If anything, for so many parts of the local governments, their workload has really skyrocketed. And so, it's good that they're in there, but it might not be enough. And we didn't see another direct stimulus payment, which, we had earlier this year, the $1,200 to many families, which helped a lot of people get by for, in some cases, a few months. And that's not in there yet. But I certainly think it's good news that that's being discussed and seems to have some traction.
Well, Lori Bettinger, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.